the recording in progress, and I will do actually a double recording on my computer, because that is also what we have learned. We have the YouTube channel actually, where we have all the talks from our previous lunch talk sessions as well. Maybe Mikko can send the link or on the chat if people are not familiar with where you can find the previous talks. Okay, so the reason why we are here in Hamburg is that I'm here as a visiting researcher, but I've become familiar with the work that's been doing here, journalism and audience research by Professor Wiebke, and then junior researcher Verena Albert.
Yes.
Okay. This is the yes color coordination and me blue. So the reason I wanted to invite you to give a talk is that when I heard you talk about this topic before, I thought that immediately that people here on this forum might be interested in learning about, do journalists and citizens think alike or not about how journalism should be practiced in this responsible manner. So now we have some findings from the German context, and then we can open discussion maybe for comparisons as well. But Wiebke, you've been doing research on journalism extensively from journalist perspective and audience perspective, and now towards the relationship perspective as well. And you are leading the Worlds of Journalism German team, which is the major survey on professional journalists globally.
For the first time.
For the first time, handed over by the Munich team, yes. I believe. Yes. But they are still coordinating the whole thing.
Yeah.
Thomas Glitch, yes. So I believe that I saw Jari here, who is part of the Finnish World of Journalism survey as well. And Verena, you are a PhD student here. The context being Hans Bredow Institute, media research.
Even if it looks differently, so I will explain.
Okay, you may explain what is the institute there referenced. And quite fittingly, Verena is doing research on constructive journalism.
Oh, yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And then part of various other related research, yes, that you will actually talk now, but then the framework of this forum is familiar for you, because we are discussing all kinds of journalisms together. So please, the floor is yours. The recording is on, and then I will chair the discussion afterwards.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you all for being here and listen to us. So first of all, I will explain why it says Research Institute Social Cohesion instead of Hans Bredow Institute. So we are at the Leibniz Institute for Media Research, Hans Bredow Institute, which is the institute where we are hosting Laura right now. And we are, as an institute, are also part of a Research Institute Social Cohesion. So section Hamburg means Hans Bredow Institute is part of this Research Institute Social Cohesion. That is an umbrella institute combining 11 different research institutes in Germany that research issues on social cohesion. We are the only institute that deals with media issues when it comes to social cohesion. So that to give you the background, and they want us to use this template for our slides. So to point out that this is research funded by the Research Institute Social Cohesion, or better, by the Federal Ministry of Education and Research here in Germany. So you already mentioned we are talking about the journalism-audience relationship today, and we call that a relationship study. To that end, that we are combining survey data from journalists and from the German population. And we are going to present items that we investigated on both sides with respect to journalistic roles, ideals of social coexistence, and journalistic epistemic standards. So as a short introduction before we present our data, when we talk about social cohesion or social responsibility of journalism and media, so we could definitely agree that has to do something with media. So we talk a lot about the different functions journalism has to fulfill in society, but actually it's a quite messy field to really nail that down, what that means, social responsibility and social cohesion when it comes to journalism and media. And that is why in a short, or no, not in a short, in a small study, we made that an empirical question by discussing in expert groups, in group discussions with different experts. So social cohesion workers, for example, who are responsible for migrants integration as one example, but also journalists and other researchers within our Institute for Social Cohesion. We turned that into empirical questions and did 4 group discussions with all these different expert groups and asked them, what do you think is the relationship between social cohesion and journalism?
Oh.
And one outcome, to make it easier for ourselves, to be honest, one outcome we already published in a paper that is not our topic today, but just make us aware about the broad field that we're talking about. So what we extracted from these group discussions, and that is also what you can find in the various literature on the topic, is social cohesion and journalism has to do with 3, we nailed that down to these 3 dimensions. It has to do with society's reachability, society's representability, and society's ability for dialogue. So what does it mean? So if we discuss about what has social cohesion and journalism to do with each other, so of course people come up with the issues. So we have at least to reach an audience to that journalism can fulfill its societal function. So that is a very important topic when it comes to reachability. And of course, if we look in the literature, we see a lot of discussions around, so where at all is the audience, or news avoidance is an issue. People are turning away from the news. Representability, social cohesion can be influenced positively, one group says, by give a broad overview of different topics and opinions and actors and ways of living in society. So by representing that broad picture that can contribute to social cohesion, but on the other hand, you could also say by reducing that complexity in terms of a shared agenda of issues, that is fostering social cohesion. So, and dialogue that comes with all these different issues. So, so do journalists talk to their audiences? What kind of user feedback do they get back? Are experts like us in the field of research, are we able to convey our messages in the media? So these different topics. So that as a broader background, so to say. Today, we are focusing on a more specific issue, which is the journalism-audience relationship. And we understand that as a relatively stable social relationship, which is characterized by co-orientation, through mutual perceptions, expectations, and more so-called relationship practices. So that sounds abstract, but in essence, it means, so when a journalist is sitting down to write an article, he or she already has an expectations about what an audience could expect. And if we turn as audiences to journalism, we already have expectations about what we expect from journalism or from a particular media outlet. So, and So this mutual co-orientation qualifies, we would say theoretically, as a social relationship in its own means. If we go even one step further and understand journalism and audiences as jointly involved in the production of public spheres, so like other theorists are doing that as well. So, for example, with respect to the concept of public connection. So if people wouldn't use journalism or media, there is no public sphere constructed, so to say. So that is a co-practice, so to say. And if we look from that perspective on the journalism-audience relationship, the particular quality of that relationship is also meaningful on a societal level, and also for issues of social cohesion. So that is, so to say, our theoretical framework or background from which we developed this empirical study. So our research questions go as follows. I'm still wondering where my mouse is, but
we do.
Yeah, it's on there.
It's there, so I can't reduce this yet. So we ask what incongruencies can be identified between what the German population considers to be important journalistic roles and what journalists in Germany themselves regard as their professional tasks. How do the two groups' ideals of living well together relate to each other? And how do epistemic understandings of objectivity and subjectivity in journalism of the two groups relate to each other? And if we look at this particular kind of relationship studies where survey data on both sides is compared, we already find some of them combining these journalistic roles, but to my knowledge, we are the first ones that look at these other dimensions. This is our data that we combined here. You already mentioned, so we are responsible here for the third wave of Worlds of Journalism data. This is where we draw our data from on the journalist side. And among citizens in Germany, we also did representative survey. And I don't go into the details here, but what you see at the bottom of the slide is that we can combine 25 items on journalistic roles, 12 items on ideas about living well together, and 11 items on epistemic ideas in journalism. So, and now I hand over to Verena, and she's going to present the first two dimensions.
Now it works.
No, it works.
Okay, great. Let's go.
The mouse is back.
So the mouse is back, great. Yeah, let's move on to our surveyed expectations of journalistic roles from the perspective of the German citizens and also the German journalists. So the first question is, what journalists want, and to this end we have listed 25 items, like Wiebke said, that model certain expectations of journalistic roles, and we ask them that journalists, please tell me how important each of these things is in your work. And the scale ranges from 1, not at all important, to 5, extremely important. And most of these items have already been asked in many previous studies, but we have also added a few new ones, such as the first one, as you can see, counteract disinformation. That's an example of a new one. And overall, many roles can be related to cohesion, such as provide information, people need to form political opinion, or also promote peace and tolerance. And there on the right hand side, we see the percentage saying extremely and very important, the mean values, and also the standard deviations. And the roles with the highest agreement are counter and disinformation, like I said before. So we asked it for the first time, and it got the first place of this range. and then provide information. People need to form political opinion, provide analysis of current affairs, be a detached observer, a really classic or traditional one, and shine a light on society's problems. We have also a new one, and that's contribute to social cohesion. So we ask directly the journalists about social cohesion, and that ranges somewhere in the middle with a mean value of 3.5. So in the middle of somewhat important and very important. And then at the end, we have tasks that journalists tend to reject, that are items that go in the direction of agenda setting, like set the political agenda. Yes, or also influence the public opinion. And now we can see the results of the German citizens, so the other side. And we have 4 role items that are at least very important. It's shine a light on society problems, promote peace and tolerance, also be a detached observer, and also counteract disinformation, like we saw before by the journalists. And also we have contribute to social cohesion in the middle, and the citizens also agrees least with agenda setting items, as you can see at the end. And now let's take a closer look at the similarities and differences of these groups. For this, we have a scatter plot, and this shows the journalists' understanding or role conception on the x-axis, and the citizens' expectations or journalistic role expectations or conceptions on the y-axis, and as mean values, as you can see with these points. And the center line shows where both would agree. So the further the points are from the line, the greater the differences from both groups. And first, let's have a look at what journalists want and what they ought to do. And the items with the highest agreement from both groups be a detached observer, shine a light on society problems, provide analysis of current affairs, provide information people need to form political opinion, point toward possible solutions to society's problems, also counteract disinformation, and discuss future implications of current events. So the approval ratings of some items are stronger for journalists. As you can see that they are on the right side of this line, and this is also with a significant difference, as indicated by this asterisk, as you can see on the right side. But we have also something like shine a light on society's problems, where both groups agree of this how important this role is. And then we see what journalists don't want and ought not to do. And so both groups reject role items that are intended to influence or support the government the most, but journalists to an even greater extent. As you can see, because it's on the left of the line. And now we move on to the next results, the ideas of social coexistence. And therefore, we ask both journalists and the citizens the following. You can have different opinions about how people should live together in a society. Please tell me to what extent the following statements correspond to your personal idea of how people should live together in a society. For me, good coexistence in a society means that, and then, for example, everyone obeys law and order, or everyone can live as he or she wishes. And there, the scale went from 1, not at all, to 5 completely. And these 12 items you can see that we asked about can theoretically be divided into two areas, you could say, or two sides. And on the left side, you can see the communal traditional items, such as everyone has a place in society, but also for this communal side, the cohesion in the families and in the neighborhood is strong. And then on the right side, more liberal and individualistic items. For example, people from different cultures live together, but also everyone has the equal chance to influence political decisions. And now, again, we have a scatter plot as with the previous results. And it's also nearly the same. The x-axis shows the ratings of the journalists, and the y-axis shows the citizens' ideals of living well together. First, let's look at the ideas that citizens and journalists consider most important. And the first, I can read them down. For me, good coexistence in a society means that everyone obeys law and order, disagreements are discussed and compromises are made, everyone can develop freely according to their abilities and preferences, and people from different cultures live together. And the first, this can be assigned to a more traditional understanding, but the other three, to a more liberal understanding. What we've seen before with this, liberal and more traditional understanding. And however, journalists agree with all four even more, similar to the role items, what we've seen before. And here we see the ideals that the citizens and journalists consider less important. And these are that everyone shares the same values, customs, and traditions, and someone is there to tell you where you are, where you have to go, where you are headed. And according to these two directions, both items are located on the traditional side. And here too, journalists reject the items significantly more strongly than the citizens do. And overall, both groups tend to agree with the liberal individualistic ideas of good coexistence, but journalists, once again, more strongly than the citizens. And now I'll head over to Wiebke again.
Okay, let's turn to our last comparison, which is journalistic epistemic standards. And that was also the first time that these kind of questions were asked in the Worlds of Journalism survey, because this issue around objectivity and subjectivity in journalism has become so it's a classic issue, of course, but during the last years, one could even say it became a more important issue. So, and a lot of discussions are revolving in the field itself around, so what actually is objective journalism and how can one do it? And also in public discussions or media critique, it's a classic to turn to objectivity in journalism. So these were the items that were asked. So I don't read them down and I don't go into details with respect to all items. We made a selection, but the question was as follows. So the following statements deal with beliefs related to how journalists know what they know. For each of them, please tell me how strongly you agree or disagree using the following options, from strongly agree 5 to strongly disagree 1. And we could imagine that is a difficult question, even for professionals. But we only asked that professionals, we also asked that the German population. So because we had the feeling that would be very interesting. So what people say. And actually, it is very interesting because when we turn into these data, we see the huge differences. So the other patterns are very similar we looked at, but here we see huge differences. So it is possible to represent objective reality in reporting. Here we have a different way of showing our data. You see that goes in green, demonstrates agreement or agree or strongly agree, and red strongly disagree or disagree. And here we see that the assessments go into a similar direction. So both over 60% of journalists and the population tend to agree or fully agree. So very coherent picture. So people are of the opinion that it is possible to represent objective reality in reporting. If we turn to the second item, the truth is inevitably shaped by those in power. We see the scissor going on, so to say. Nearly half of the population fully agree or tend to agree with this statement. And on the sides of the journalist lists, it's only or still about 13% of journalists. So I'm still not sure if that is a low or a high number. So it's almost 13% that of among the journalists that tend to agree here. It is impossible for journalists to withhold their personal beliefs from reporting. Again, a similar picture. Almost half of the population tends to agree or fully agree, while journalists, it's just under 20%. At the same time, here we have again high agreement that journalists should let the facts speak for themselves. So over 70% on both sides of the fully agree or somewhat agree. Things are either true or false. There is no in between. More than a quarter of the population thinks or tend to agree here, and only on the side of journalists, it's only 3.5%. So again, similar direction, but by and large, two different opinions on these items. Our conclusion now, what journalists, if we look at role items, what journalists in Germany particularly want and what they ought to do in the eye of the general public is to provide factual information base, highlight societal problems, enable opinion formation, identify solutions to societal problems. So here, at least when it comes to our German data, we have a high congruence. So remember, the first question was so about the congruences or incongruences. So what journalists want to do is what they ought to do. This is our short framing for that. When it comes to these ideas of living well together, we see that journalists in Germany have a more liberal individualistic conception of good coexistence in society than the population at large. Overall, however, the views of both groups go into a similar direction. And we also did first analysis by looking at the relation or correlation between role conceptions and these coexisting in society items. And here we find that on the population side, that the liberal individualist conceptions of good coexisting in society comes with more diverse expectations of journalistic roles. However, so when we turn to the epistemic ideas about objectivity and subjectivity, we find on the one hand a high level of agreement on objective reporting and letting the facts speak for themselves. But the population feels much more strongly that the truth is shaped by those in power. and that it is impossible for journalists to withhold their personal beliefs from the reporting. So, and if on the one hand, there's a high expectation when it comes to objective reporting, but on the other, population thinks it's for journalists impossible to hold their opinions back, that really is an issue, I would say. So we consider these findings as indicators of significantly distinct systemic epistemic views or perspectives held by journalists and the general population that probably have an influence on attitudes towards journalism and the quality of reporting. So if you look at public discussions about media reporting, it almost always revolves about that issue of subjectivity or objectivity in journalism. So we think that studying notions of good society and epistemic ideas can help to better understand journalistic self and other expectations, and thus also what journalism is expected to contribute in and for society. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you for the talk. Maybe you can now stop sharing, so then we can also see on the screen.
I would, but